Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. If you'd like to show your support for our show, review us on iTunes or visit our massive mid-century modern archives at USModernist.org, including the US Modernist Library with now nearly 2 million pages of architecture magazines going back to 1891. Wow.
Whoa.
Today, US Modernist Radio welcomes serial modernist Michael LaFetra and also musical guest Lulu and the Lounge Lizards. And now, your hosts, the names Frances Anderton cannot bring herself to say without wincing, George Smart and Frank King.
Yes. Hello, I'm one of those. I'm Frank King, and support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from not only Gutenberg for those pages from 1891, but also from realtor Angela Roll. Now, in a caper we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll was born in Monte Carlo, the love child of a Brazilian heiress and her Italian driver, Sergio. Sent to boarding school in the Alps, she snuck out at night to bartend at the five-star resort in Vals, Switzerland. It was there, in the Peter Zumthor-designed thermal spa, steaming in the November chill, that she overheard a detailed conversation between Stavros Pedikov, a wealthy Russian planning a modernist Paris hotel, and famous international architect Jean Nouvel. Inspired, she whipped up a better hotel design of her own on a bar napkin, no small feat, which she submitted to Pedikov and won the commission. Jean Nouvel was furious. Furious, I say. And in his rage, he turned to a life of crime as Dr. Evil in the Austin Powers movies.
I never knew that.
Google it. Yeah, Google it. The resemblance is uncanny. 18 months later, at the hotel opening, Nouvel took a cue from the Three Stooges and secretly placed hundreds of banana peels in the new hotel rooms. Thousands were injured, and Angela, of course, was blamed. She took the channel to London and hired barrister Eric of Windsor, who successfully fought the slip-and-fall lawsuits on, wait for it, appeal, and they married the next year.
Really?
She moved to America to become a formidable real estate agent with modernist architecture training for buyers and sellers of modernist houses. Angela Roll is your special agent. You can reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550.
Hey, thank you, Frank. I'm George Smart. Most people listening to this show tend to like modernism. They buy the books, they watch the documentaries, they get a few pieces of furniture maybe, they go on a few trips, they visit the work of a few famous architects. Sometimes they buy or build a modernist house. Our guest today, Michael LaFetra, is way beyond that. Born in Los Angeles, Michael had a successful career creating restaurants in New York City before he moved back home to L.A. in 1999. Since then, he bought a modernist house. Then another. Then another.
Oh, I'm getting the serial part, yes.
Yeah. He may be the foremost collector of modernist houses in the country, if not the world, with houses by architects such as Quincy Jones, John Lautner, Rudolf Schindler, Frank Gehry, Rex Lottery, Richard Neutra, Paul Williams, Pierre Koenig, Ray Kepi, Thornton Abel, Stephen Ehrlich, and Robert Skinner. It's pretty much the who's who of L.A. architecture. And wait, there's more. In 2004, Michael launched a production company, Foundation Films, that produced Night Train, The Seat Filler, What We Do Is Secret, Bart Got a Room, and the documentary Kevorkian. He's worked with stars such as William H. Macy, Jennifer Tilly, Danny Glover, Cheryl Hines, Glenn Turman, and Steve Zahn. And as an actor, well, who can forget his performance as Sweaty in the 1998 film Adverse Possession? I'm sure Michael would like to forget that. Plus, he's CEO of Foundation, a full-service forensic architectural consulting firm that advises on restorations, making him the CSI of modernism. Please welcome serial modernist Michael LaFetra.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Well, pretty good. First of all, thank you for buying all these houses, because I suspect that if you hadn't come along and restored all of them, some of them would be gone, right?
Yeah, maybe not gone, but certainly not the iteration that the architect originally put forward would not exist anymore. Because what's happening more and more is dirt is more valuable than architecture. So often they get torn down. So or in some parlance, it might even be worse to remodel a pure piece of architecture than to just tear it down. I know that might be kind of sacrilegious to say, but
really,
by the time you're done shabby chiking up a Lautner, you've well, I mean, it would almost be better to just. I'm not going to say it, but you know where I'm going with that.
Well, to be easier, I mean, it is probably easier to tear something down and build anew.
I would think so. It'd certainly be. I think it both in the short term and the long term, it'd certainly be cheaper.
Yeah.
But you know, if common sense prevailed, the world would be a different place.
So you have to really love it to do what you're doing. And I want to ask, how did you fall into this coming out to L.A.? What was the first modernist house that you bought?
Well, what happened was I was looking for a house at the beach. In really simple terms, when I was a kid growing up, we used to go down to Newport in Orange County, and I had in my head this kind of wood-sided sort of Newport Beach salt box. It didn't have any architectural pedigree at all, except it looked okay with Hires root beer cans sitting in it. You know, I mean, it was not the notion of architecture. It just wasn't part of my lexicon at all. So when my broker said to me, well, what style of house are we looking for? I said, I want a Newport Beach salt box. And he said, okay, but we're not looking at Newport Beach, so maybe we broaden our scope a little bit. So he gave me a stack of magazines to look through. And it just so happened that the Architectural Digest, I think it was 99. I know that Diane Keaton was on the cover, and there in the center of it was a story on Case Study 21 having been restored by Dan Cracchioli. And I took one look at that house, and I said, oh, I want that on the beach. And my broker said, you're going to have to ramp up your spending if you want to try to find that on the beach. And once I realized that something like that could be had, I just had never seen anything like it before. I remember thinking when I saw the pictures, I remember thinking, boy, this would be like living in MoMA, New York. I mean, it would really be fantastic. I mean, the only thing that separates you from the outside is a pane of glass. And again, growing up, I grew up in I wouldn't deign to call it a pedigree of it wasn't any kind of modern pedigree at all, but it was a merchant builder, who had his eye towards Eichlers. So we had pitched roofs, and we had, anywhere it was possible to put plate glass instead of a wall, there was sliding glass doors everywhere. So I grew up with that notion of, this has been so commonplace, it's almost kind of funny to say it now, but, letting the outdoors inside,
Well, that was not in vogue in the 90s. I mean, people were just rediscovering modernism.
Right. I mean, it was quite the opposite. Those houses were just looked at as being, they were bad in all ways. They were impossible to keep cool. They were impossible to keep warm. They were impossibly small.
They were leaky.
Didn't have enough bedrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So
they were what were they thinking kind of houses.
Right, right. And again, it was an experiment in the 40s, for the most part, to try to use whatever new building materials there were to try to get the general population used to steel and glass and concrete, because those typically weren't materials you used for residential houses. But it was trying to get people used to seeing that as being sort of or normalizing those types of materials.
Apropos of your introduction, have you ever played poker with Jennifer Tilley? I hear she is really good.
I've heard stories, but no, I did not get to play poker with her. I did slap back a cocktail or two with her, but we did not play poker.
Not even Uno?
No. Nope. And I believe there was a non-disclosure agreement, and I've already said too much.
Yeah, she used to be on all those cable poker shows.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And did quite well on a bunch of them, as I understand. Yeah. So, Michael, did you ultimately buy Case Study House 21?
I did. What happened was about a month after we closed on a house that had absolutely nothing to do with modern at the beach, that particular house, my broker called me up. It was actually 30 days. It was a month to the day after we closed on the beach house. He called me and he said, "You're never going to believe this. Remember that house on the beach?" And I said, "I do." And he said, "It's available." And I said, "Where is it?" He said, "It's in Hollywood Hills." And I said, "We need to go see it?" ? And he said, "I think we should." So I did one walkthrough. They were playing Sinatra when I walked in.
Oh yeah, you got to do that.
I didn't. The only part of it that I had to kind of chew on for a while was I had gone from being a serial renter to having not an insignificant mortgage to contemplating having two mortgages. So suddenly my financial life changed in a pretty significant way. But I did go ahead and buy it.
And what year was that? 99?
This would have been end of 99, beginning of 2000. Actually, if I'm going to get it just right, October. It would have been November of 99. So
and what was the Sinatra song that was playing when you went into the house?
I don't. But I do know it was Sinatra. Because that does sound a little manufactured, but it was in fact Sinatra. I just can't recall the actual.
I think it's probably standard issue for realtors, like when they used to put cookies in houses.
You would think, like burning some patchouli or cooking some patchouli.
Baking a pie.
Yeah,
play some Sinatra.
Cookies, yeah, exactly.
Did you move into the house, or did you just work right away to renovate it and sell it?
I did. That house became my weekend house. So what I did is during the week I was living in Malibu, and then on the weekends I would come into the city. And again, the notion of renovating or restoring or even painting a house was so outside of my universe. I'd never owned a house before. I didn't even know those were things that people had to do. Growing up, I think my folks probably painted the house twice. The whole time we lived there, it just wasn't when you live in an area that doesn't have weather particularly, it's just not that. And you have to keep an eye on the termites, but you don't have to. Painting every year or every 2 years is not really a thing. So it was a number of years. I think I owned that house for about four, maybe 5 years. And the timeline goes like this. I remember the day I closed escrow, there was one message on the answering machine when I showed up on Friday night, and it was Pierre. It was Pierre Koenig. He'd called and he'd said, and I've told this story before, so I have this pretty much by rote now. "This is Pierre Koenig, your architect. I can't imagine that you're ever going to want to do any work on the house, but if you do, I'd like to get first crack at it." And I thought, wow, I didn't even know. Well, first of all,
that's service.
Yeah, it was incredible. So within a couple of weeks, I called him just to meet with him, and he informed me that Dan Cracchioli had put 90% of the house in order and had worked to get the house nominated as a LA cultural landmark. And would I go ahead and go along with it? And I said, of course. I couldn't imagine saying no at that point. And he said there were 3 or 4 or 5 little projects that were almost completed but weren't completed prior to the sale of the house, and would I be interested in finishing those up? And I said, of course. So the really big one was getting the roof fountains to work properly. The ponds circulate. The way that the house was originally created, the ponds would catch rainwater when it would hit the roof. It would drain through the scuppers into the ponds. And at some point, it had occurred to Pierre that if we put in pumps, you could circulate the pond in order to avoid putting chlorine in it. And you could also cool the house somewhat by having the moisture circulating.
These ponds were next to the house?
They were surrounded the house.
So it was sort of that swamp cooling method.
Yeah, and again, it didn't really... I think at the end of the day, it was mostly for show, and it was a delightful sound in the house.
Oh, it's beautiful, yeah.
Just delightful. I have moments where I still think about that house, where I think, boy, oh boy, not for a family so much, but for a single guy, there was no wasted space in that house. It was just remarkable.
What happened next with the house? What was its next?
So we finished a couple of projects, and it was things like getting those pumps dialed in, and then there was a fountain that existed in the atrium between the two bathrooms that had, I think at one point had been installed, but it wasn't installed to Pierre's specifications, and it had since been removed, the original one. So we rebuilt a new one and put it in to his specifications. So that was kind of a big project, because we had to find a metal fabricator. And they always say it's not custom, but then as soon as you start monkeying with the metal fabricator, they say, oh, this is a custom deal. This is going to take a while.
Ka-ching.
So it ended up taking 6 months to put this fountain together. So again, they were little, for the most part, compared to what was coming down the pike, these were very small projects. So,
and how long did you hold on to it before you sold it?
I think it was about 4 or 5 years. I want to say it was 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly. What happened again was I was complaining to Pierre at a party, I think with the LA Conservancy, I don't remember for sure, but I was complaining about the fact that I had these balconies at my house in Malibu that were slowly starting to, I don't want to say they were collapsing, but they were starting to sink in the center. And the shoring up of these things was going to cost me more money than I wanted to spend. And I told him what I was paying for it. I think it was like $20,000 or something. And Pierre said, for $200 a square foot, I just build you a new house.
Nice.
And I said, again, it never occurred to me that was something I could do, but I thought, boy, oh boy. So I could sell the case study house, and for the cost of the sale, the proceeds from that sale will probably cover the cost of the house to build.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
So now, had you met Pierre Koenig before he called you when you first closed? Okay. But apparently later on you were chummy enough that you were hanging out at parties together.
Well, I mean, what happened was, Pierre had a reputation for being the first guy on the job when houses would trade hands. I didn't know that at the time, but and he liked to affiliate himself with his clients because he was, let's face it, the right guy to do that work.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
When we went to look for contractors to build the house out in the beach, it was tough.
Well, it's always tough to find the right builders for modernist houses.
Right, but we were talking about flying probably 80 pieces of steel, and I mean flanged long pieces of steel, because we would fabricate the whole thing on site. We had to fly it over the top of a Lautner house with an owner who I'm not going to name. You could find out if you want to.
Come on.
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I never got sued by him, and I'm out of there now. So
let's just say it's a neighbor on Point Lechuza.
It was, in fact, a neighbor on Point Lechuza.
Uh-huh, yep.
Google it.
I know that house.
So the notion of flying 80 pieces of steel through a 20-foot wide opening and not hitting anyone's property daunting.
Yeah.
With every contractor we met. In any case, Pierre liked to affiliate himself as quickly as possible with an owner when the houses would change hands, with good reason.
What was your next house, Michael?
I got the Schindler bug. So Schindler kind of became my guy. One of the things I always really liked about Schindler almost immediately was this is a guy who, he wasn't just solving site problems. He was also exploring his own muse. And when his houses were executed to his specifications, they're magical. I mean, they just sing. I think that he and Lautner had that in common. The difference is that Schindler got to do it more often because his budget was better. Lautner was always constrained by the fact that he liked to play with steel and concrete, which is much more expensive than plywood and stucco, which is.
But weren't Lautner's projects always sort of on a bigger scale than Schindler's generally?
The later projects were.
Okay.
Certainly the later projects were. I think that Lautner's earlier work was similar to Schindler in that it was people who knew people who already owned Lautner's. So initially, Lautner's projects were super reasonable as far as the costs were concerned. It wasn't until Silvertop and then Points Forward where things got a little...
Yeah, he was very well known by that point.
Right. Yeah, he was as Frank Lloyd Wright liked to refer to him, the second most important or second best living architect.
So at what point, Michael, did you kind of get that you were going to be in the modernist house renovation, restoration business, and it was not just a lark?
Well, it kind of wasn't a thing. In fact, it wasn't really a thing. Being one of those people, there were just a handful of people who were doing it that I knew about. I know Benedict Taschen, I think.
Yeah, he did Lautner's Chemisphere House.
Yeah, and I can't remember if he did that before or after. I know that Joel Silver was doing it because he worked on a couple of Frank Lloyd Wrights. In fact, Dan Cracchioli was his second. I wasn't in pursuit of this thing it wasn't even a hobby at that point. It was just something that I was interested in, and I thought, here was this Schindler that I purchased in Sherman Oaks, and when I went to talk to Julius Schulman to see if he had any color photographs of it, he maintained that it wasn't even a Schindler house.
Oh.
And that's kind of my point. Like the go-to guy who knew everything about modern architecture and certainly its location in the city, the only guy who might have known more would have been David Gebhard. In fact, that's how I realized that Julius had it wrong, is that Gebhard had that house actually published in his book. In fact, I showed it to Julius, and he said, "Oh, I think it's been a mistake." And the way we finally figured out that we were both right, in a sense, because the street address when the house was built was a different street address, and Sherman Oaks wasn't the place when it was built back in the 30s. So Julius had it as 4008, and I think he had it as 2 words, Sunny Slope, and I had it 4000 Sunny Slope. And so his was 4008 Sunny Slope, Los Angeles, and mine was 4000 Sunny Slope, Sherman Oaks. And
yeah, there are a couple of those that had changed over time.
Precisely.
So, Michael, you are known as a careful preservationist, unlike Priscilla Presley, who took a wonderful John Lautner house and turned it into a Mediterranean villa. Of course, what do you expect from a woman who buries her husband in the backyard like a dog? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she and I are after different things, clearly.
True.
Is there much of that in L.A., Michael, this taking modernist houses and turning them into something else?
Oh, I thought you meant buried husbands in
backyards. Not that I know of. I think, my sense is that the population kind of follows fashion. You wouldn't have imagined in 2002 that people would be building 12,000 square foot Ray Cappies.
Right.
And they are. So the query becomes, is that a good thing? And I suspect that it is a good thing, but it doesn't have that much to do with preservation. I think that there are buyers out there who get real excited about owning something that's already famous, and then there are buyers who want to build things that they hope will be famous. So I think there's a taste for all of it. I think there's a taste for all of it. I mean, as soon as you start reading in the trades, any magazine or newspaper that follows an architect's name with esque,
yes,
you know that it's happened. So there was Neutra-esque for a while, and then there was Lochner-esque, and I've even seen Schindler-esque, and I thought, ooh.
Yes, we see a lot of inspired by Paul Williams on multiple listing service.
Yep.
Things like that.
Yep. It's interesting, too, because Paul Williams is one of these guys he was a historical styles guy for the most part. So you could be talking about a Georgian, you could be talking colonial, you could be talking modern. Williams is a really good guy, or a really good thing for a real estate professional to use, because it can mean whatever you want it to mean.
Because he did so many different types of houses.
Precisely. And he was really good at all of that stuff. I mean, I can't think of an architect who had a steadier hand for more competing styles than Paul Williams. Certainly not on this coast. We're
still finding houses by Paul Williams that have not been recorded because his records were lost in the Watts riots.
Yeah, in the fires, yeah.
And we're digging up a lot of the materials now. We probably discovered at least a dozen in the last year.
Yep, that's fantastic.
And adding them to the file out there. One of our volunteers want to give a shout out to Michael Locke, who is a realtor in L.A. that volunteers for us and goes around searching out these houses and taking great photographs. So thank you for all that, Michael Locke. Let's shift a little bit, Michael, to food.
Huh?
You started out with restaurants in New York?
Yeah, I actually there was a restaurant called Miracle Grill, and this might be a little folklore-y, but I believe this is true. I was certainly told this. There's a chef who, at the time, was not a chef. He became a very, very famous chef who got his start at Miracle Grill. I just came up with his name, Bobby Flay.
Oh, so, well, that's pretty famous.
Right. Yeah. And at the time, Bobby Flay was just, Bobby Flay from the East Village, but he was one of the original cooks at that point. He wasn't a chef. And this was one of these places in the East Village where you could go and have margaritas that would just, peel your socks off, and really, really delicious. One of the things they had a blue corn-crusted catfish taco with ancho chili mayonnaise. And I get a little sad when I think about the fact that it's not there anymore, because it was really special stuff.
I think I've seen him make that on one of the food shows.
Probably.
Yeah.
When was this restaurant open?
Well, this would have been
the 80s?
Boy, oh boy. Probably late 80s. Yeah, that sounds about right. The first one was open before I moved to New York, or certainly before I was paying attention to that stuff. But my girlfriend at the time was one of the waitstaff at the East Village branch, and I met the owner through her, and the owner said to me at one point, "Hey, you like restaurants?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Would you ever consider investing in a restaurant?" And I said, "Absolutely." And she said, "We're thinking about opening one in the West Village. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." So it ran, I want to say it ran probably 15 years, certainly a decade.
Yeah. So as an investor, you're still doing restaurants, right, in L.A.?
I did 2 more restaurants when I moved to Los Angeles. I may be cured. I'm not sure yet.
Because it's tough.
Yeah, that's why I said I might be cured.
Well, you have this mistress, this other woman, this Modernist Holmes.
Well, I wanted to ask about the intersection.
So many mistresses, I'm telling you. There's homes, there's movies. There's
so many masters, too.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a pansexual world, Tom.
Yeah,
there you go.
When you were investing in these restaurants, was decor a factor? Did you incorporate some of your architectural taste in the restaurants you invested in?
Not in the New York restaurants.
Okay.
When the restaurants opened in L.A., I did have a hand in them, in kind of laying things out.
And how do you lay out a restaurant architecturally to be the most successful?
Well, it wasn't so much the actual restaurant, because I'm thinking specifically about the Santa Monica branch of Tinga that we had. Is a very interesting, eclectic space. The main restaurant was a courtyard, and then there were 4 other rooms that sort of opened out onto this courtyard, but the main part of the restaurant was outside. And in Los Angeles, we don't have weather here, and it never gets cold. So it seemed like a slam dunk.
Sure.
But in fact, it gets chilly here, and we do have weather. It doesn't rain a lot, but it can get very hot, and it can also get really chilly, especially when you're when you're 2 miles from the beach. So we had each room sort of designed in its own theme. There was one room that was set up sort of like an old style men's speakeasy kind of thing, where it was all reds and blacks and shiny metals. There was another room that had this kind of Western decor. These weren't modern by any stretch, but the notion was, what can we do? What can we get away with where we're using materials again that generally wouldn't be specified for restaurants? Can we get away with this stuff? And at one point we had a suede polyester plastic that we used on the floors and on the walls, which was a material that was supposed to be used for commercial furniture.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like something you could walk on.
Precisely. So we tried it. We tried lots of. We tried stringing mylar on the ceiling. We tried all kinds of things.
And what was your biggest success?
The restaurant ran for about 5 years, I think, the Santa Monica branch, and the other one ran for a decade. So we did okay.
Yeah.
We did okay. And again,
big city restaurant world.
It had great reviews, particularly the coffee and the agua frescas and the tortillas.
Yep. I still have moments where, because I'm still friendly with the chef, who's a co-owner, we still have moments where we get together for dinner or meet for drinks or whatever, and we just kind of shake our heads and commiserate, like, why? What? We can't figure out what went wrong. To the point, maybe nothing went wrong. Maybe we were a glowing success. But I don't know how people make the kind of money that you hear about on the Food Network. I don't know how you do it.
I'm a little skeptical of some of that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. They're no longer calling it reality programming. I just found this out. They call it unscripted.
They've changed the name.
There must have been a lawsuit in there somewhere.
It's like wrestling is now, I think, has some new name. Hey, Michael, you produced the documentary Kevorkian about assisted suicide.
Sure.
And yet you've stayed alive through many difficult renovations, which most people say can be a real killer.
Yeah.
Funny.
How do you manage to keep your sanity during a renovation, particularly in a modernist house where you can find any manner of crap along the way?
That's a very good question, but you've made a couple of assumptions there.
Okay.
One is, how do you keep your sanity? I had a story I used to tell myself, and it helped get me through it. I used to say to a contractor, specifically it was on the Schindler Howe House, I said, just give me one corner of one room. I just want one corner of one room in the house completely done, so that whenever I start feeling overwhelmed, I can go over and I can stand in that corner and I can say, this is what it's going to be like when we're finished.
Ah.
I mean, that's a really big part of it.
Did they do it for you?
There was one room in the living. There was one corner in the living room where they got the glass lined up just right,
like a safe space.
Right, precisely, precisely.
How many houses were you renovating at one time? Are you you're serial?
There was a moment where there was a moment where I had 6 projects going at the same time. And there were a couple of film projects too. I just kind of lost track.
Well, that can happen. I mean,
you kept saying yes to the next house before you forgot you already had
Well, the other thing is that, you know, these things, when they get finished, while they're being finished, they're getting nominated, and once they're nominated, they're sold. And, you know, each of these things had their own sort of life. And the way that this thing finally played through, and I don't need to cue the violins or anything because I was not the only person who got in trouble in 2007 and 2008, but the buyers stopped showing up. So suddenly I was no longer a serial restorer. I was a serial collector.
Oh.
Not by design, but that's the way the story got written because that's kind of what happened. And it was only... it was last year that I sold the last one.
Was that the Rollins house?
No, that was 3 years ago. The most recent one I sold was the Koenig house we built at the beach.
Okay.
And that was just a couple months ago, 6 months ago maybe.
And I read you sold to Ed Norton one of the Lautner houses.
I did, the Lautner at the Colony.
Last year, I guess.
Yeah, that was the tail end of last year. Yeah, that sounds right.
So what have you got in inventory, Michael? What can I buy from you this afternoon?
I am inventory free.
Oh, and a happy man, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm still looking.
Okay.
I got a trip scheduled for New York tomorrow.
Okay.
So, super secret, I'm going to go look at a couple of properties.
Are you familiar with Neutra's Chewy House? I understand that's for sale.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough story. The way I understand it is it's either the estate or the kids, and I'm not sure which. I've heard both stories. They need to dispose of the property in order to come up with cash, and it's unclear as to whether or not. And frankly, it's no one's business what the legality of the situation is. The state either has tax or the kids want to cash out, and in either case, that's totally their right. The last I'd heard was there was a phantom buyer who wanted to take the Chewy house and put it in a different place.
Is that even possible?
Sure. I mean, anything's possible.
Okay. Because I usually think with Neutra houses, they're not very movable. Well,
so you bring up a really interesting point. Whenever I'm looking at stuff, I have to ask, there's a question when you're talking about restoration. And the question is, are we talking about the idea, the execution of the idea, or are we talking about the execution of the material? And if we're talking about execution of material, your point is well taken. But if we're talking about execution of idea, it kind of doesn't matter if you're using single-pane glass, does it?
Right.
I mean, the idea is glass.
Right.
And frankly, double-pane glass is going to be quieter and it's going to be better against the elements. So maybe it's better. So again, I think to cut the house in half or in quarters and to transport those 4 quarters of that particular house to a different location, I wouldn't want to do it.
Because it's on a hill. I mean, it's not exactly easy to get even equipment up there.
I wouldn't want to pay for it, that's for sure.
I've driven up there to check out the property, and it would be, that's going to be a big project.
Well, we hope somebody comes along and buys it and takes care of it as well as you've taken care of the houses over the years.
We certainly hope for that. We certainly hope for that. And, one of the things that's a little bit of a trick with this stuff, too, is, as you guys are aware, the really good architects, well, let me say that a different way. There are 2 ways that an architect will slice a problem. One is, we don't know what the future is going to hold, so let's go ahead and design this in such a way that we could put it anywhere and it'll be great. And then there's another school, it could be the same architect, frankly, that says, these are the complexities and difficulties with this particular site and with this particular family, and here is the list of solutions that I've come up with and executed as an architectural solution. This is what we're going to build. I know that one of the things Pierre Koenig told me, which I thought was fantastic, he said, I teach all of my students at USC to build all the way to the edge, because if you leave any place open for a terrace or a balcony, they're going to fill it in at some point.
Boy, isn't that true?
Yeah. So, again, with an eye on the future, thinking about, well, could I make this building work somewhere else? And it's a architectural problem / solution, depending upon how you decide to slice it.
Well, Michael, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Me too.
Please keep up the good work.
Absolutely, I will.
And keep us posted on your next acquisition.
I
certainly
will.
Try to advertise it for you.
I've been going to your site way before you had a radio show, looking for architectural details. And you guys have one of the best, one of the most complete libraries. I would say it's certainly easier and more efficient for me personally than going up to the Getty. So I appreciate that you have all that published online. That site has been, I save it. I mean, it's permanently in my Safari. So every time I load Safari, it's there. So I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that.
Well, that's high praise coming from you. Thank you very much.
Of course.
We try to get as much information out there as we can.
It's great stuff.
Dropping by the studio, it's a special reunion of Lulu and the Lounge Lizards with one of my favorite songs, East of the Sun.
East of the sun and west of the moon, we'll build a dream house of love, dear. Near to the sun in the day, near to the moon at night, we'll live in a lovely way, dear. Living on love in pale moonlight, just you and I, forever and a day. Love will not die, we'll keep it that way. Up among the stars we'll find a harmony of life to a lovely tune. East of the sun and west of the moon, dear. East of the sun and west of the moon. Sun and west of the moon, we'll build a dream house of love, dear. Near to the sun in the day, near to the moon at night, we'll live in a lovely way, dear. Living on love and pale moonlight, just you and I, forever and a day. Love will not die, we'll keep it that way. Up among the stars we'll find a harmony of life to a lovely tune. East of the sun and west of the moon, dear.
Wow, that was great. Let's introduce the band. In the late 1990s, Linda Smith was lead singer of Lulu and the Lounge Lizards, a band that has evolved to be known as Southern Roots. The Lounge Lizards played shows at the Durham Armory, the Black Mountain Leaf Festival, the Carrboro Arts Center, and other venues. Linda retired from the band in the mid-2000s, but we're thrilled to have her reunited with the band here today. We've got Richard Taswell on piano, David Shore, epidemiological statistician by day, drummer by night, and Jeff Brown on sax. Linda, how did the band get started?
Oh, I had always had a dream of having a band like this and doing all those wonderful vocals that were done back in the 30s and 40s by Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan. And I ran into David at the Leaf Festival in one year, and he was such a nice guy. I said, if I ever start a band, would you come play drums for me? And he agreed. And that was the beginning of the band. And then I ran into other musicians, and we started pulling the band together. And I said, okay, I'm actually going to be able to live my dream.
And I remember you had some great costumes at your gigs. Where did you get those?
Well, actually thrift stores. A good friend of mine had a dress that I dressed up in for a party and loved it. So that was the first dress I ever used. And she loaned it to me for years, actually. And then my mother and I found a hat one Christmas that I was like, I got to have that hat because it matches the dress so much. Then you add a feather boa and some gloves, and all of a sudden you're Lulu.
You've got another song for us? What is it?
Oh, yeah, we do. We're going to do one of your favorites, as a matter of fact, a swing tune we used to do at almost every swing dance called All of Me. All of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see? No good without you. Take my lips, I want to lose them. Take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbye left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on, dear, without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? I'm no good without you. Take my lips, I want to lose them. Take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbye left me with eyes that cry and cry. And how can I go on, dear, without you? You took the part that once was my heart.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550.
Visit USModernist.org to listen to past shows and discover our massive mid-century modernist archives. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, researches our guest from a secret underground bunker, not so secret anymore, very close to the Whole Foods. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and Frank and I will be back in 2 weeks with another swinging edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
Frank Sinatra will be served.